Hi everyone, my name is Daniela and I am the Creative Director for FAR, Center for Contemporary Art. Today we are on our second installment of FAR Community Creators, a video series interviewing local creatives and just getting to know their work and sharing that with you. Today we are talking with Shelly Westerhausen. She is a food photographer and creator of Vegetarian Ventures.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really grateful that you're joining us, and I'm excited to share your work with the community. So let's start by sharing a little bit about Vegetarian Ventures and what you do.
So yeah, food photography is just kind of one avenue of many that I do with Vegetarian Ventures. So I've got my food photography avenue, I also have my food writing avenue, and then I do recipe development. And so I have a blog, which is where this kind of all started, and I use all three with my blog. And then I also do freelance with brands, so like websites, sometimes like clothing brands, magazines, restaurants, where I'll then use those skills to either do food photography or writing, or I'll develop a recipe for them. And so I've kind of got the blog, I've got the freelance, and then I also have my books, which I have 2 cookbooks, and then I've got a third one on the way. And those are kind of the 3 buckets that take up a lot of my time.
Well, you're sitting sort of in your home right now where you're doing most of your work right now, I take it.
I am, yeah, I'm in my studio. Can't really see, I've got my lighting set up over there, and then I've got all my props over there.
We're going to take a look behind the scenes at one of Shelly's photo shoots, and you can get an idea of what goes into creating some of the photos that we've seen. And we'll chat a little bit more after we get to see the work. So I love being able to see your process, and I'm really grateful for you taking the time and sharing that with us. Tell us a little bit more about that process. So in the video, we saw a time lapse. Obviously, it's sped up. What does an actual photo shoot like that? What kind of time does it take? What happens to the food after a certain amount of time? Like, what kinds of tricks have you sort of learned as you've done this?
Yeah, so that was just kind of a small snippet of the process. So most of my shoots are a couple day shoots. So what you saw is the photographing aspect, but the day before, or a couple days before, I usually have a prep day, and so that prep day, I would say, is probably anywhere from like 3 to 5 hours, and I am brainstorming on a concept. I'm then coming up with a visual concept, the mood I want to be conveyed during the shoot, if there's any props I want to pull for, anything like that. And then I have to make the grocery list and go shopping for all of the food. So that's kind of the pre-prep, pre-shoot prep. And then the day of, the shoot is usually between like 7 and 9 hours. I am just like very much so a perfectionist. So once I start shooting, I have a hard time stopping. I would say I usually start around 8 or 9 in the morning, and the first like 2 or 3 hours are spent just prepping the food. So chopping everything, making the food, anything like that. And then usually from, about 10:30 on, I then start shooting. And I usually I shoot for having between 5 and 7 final photos that are all completely different. So I usually do, that many setups throughout the day, and I do all the styling, which obviously takes a long time. And since I for the most part I do it all in my home alone, I'm constantly, it takes forever because I'm looking at that everything is styled correctly, that the lighting is correct, that my setup is all set up, everything like that. So yeah, the day of is usually pretty intense. And then once I'm done with that, I completely shut everything down. I step away from the photos, and then I always wait to edit them until at least the next day, so then I can see them with fresh eyes. Because once you're looking at the same photos for 4 hours, they can start to just feel, you can start going crazy, like picking everything apart. So, and then the next day I usually spend like 1 or 3 hours editing them, sizing them for the brand, and getting them all ready to send to the client or to put on my website. And obviously, if I'm going to put it on my website, there's additional time that's then spent to write up the blog post, to write up the recipe, which if there is a recipe involved, that's a whole nother element of recipe testing I have to do beforehand. So yeah, it usually ends up being about a 3-day project for most of my shoots.
So I was also curious, you mentioned getting hungry listening to recipe or food stuff. So how do you cope with that during your process? Like, don't you just want to snack on the beautiful things that you got laid out?
I do, yeah. So I've gotten pretty good at knowing that, when I cook something at 9 a.m., we're not going to be able to eat it till like 6. And so I usually end up snacking on yogurt or cereal in the middle. Like my shoots are very not glamorous from my angle. And usually around like 4 p.m., Wyatt starts coming in, like asking like, are you almost done? Like, is there anything I can eat? So yeah, I usually don't end up eating the food until way later. And obviously some stuff, since I don't shoot meat, I don't really have to worry about stuff being like set out for too long. But for the most part, I'd say like 80% of the stuff is still edible by the end.
Nice. So yeah, how long have you been a vegetarian? Has it been your whole life?
Yeah, I've been a vegetarian since I was 12. So I was kind of I don't know, I've always been a really big introvert. And like when I was growing up, my best friend was my dog, and we lived in farm country. So I always saw like horses and pigs and stuff like that. And I just really had trouble like imagining eating them. So that was kind of why I started when I was 12. And I've just continued to stick with it. I just can't imagine eating meat at this point.
So we saw a little bit about your work and behind the scenes. I'm interested to know how this pandemic has affected your work and your process and projects you've had ongoing. I know it's affected your personal life as well. So yeah, share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm really lucky in that for the most part, my work has not been affected too much compared to a lot of people in other industries. Some of the drawbacks have obviously been sourcing ingredients. So when the pandemic, or like when we all went on lockdown at first, there was a lot of shortage on flour and eggs and all these things. And I was in the middle of recipe developing my third cookbook. And when when you're testing, you have to do it exactly as the recipe calls for. So I kind of had to halt on that a little bit. But other than that, and then there's been a couple times where I'm working for a client and I can't find an ingredient. But other than that, it's actually really benefited me in some ways, which I feel a little guilty saying, obviously, with everything going on. But a lot of people are cooking more at home right now because a lot of the restaurants are closed. And so I've seen an increase in interest in my content, which has been really helpful to keep me motivated and kind of distracted through all of this. And then I've had a couple brands I've worked with that I ended up working with because they had like large scale shoots scheduled and they had to completely cancel those when people couldn't be interacting. And so they knew that I had a home studio where I could do everything myself. So I've actually been able to get a couple gigs that way because I can just do everything from home. And then the one way that it's actually helped me streamline my process is that I now have started ordering groceries to get delivered, which I never did before. And it's kind of amazing because the amount of time I was spending at the grocery store sourcing things for my shoots was a little bit ridiculous now that I look back. So it's definitely made me rethink some of my processes, which has been really good for me. But in general, I'm just such an introvert and I already work from home so much that it didn't affect me too much.
Online groceries I was not a believer at first. Even though I'm a mom, I feel like as a mom, you automatically like, this is going to save me time. But I really like that click list. I like, yeah.
No, and you know exactly what you're getting. You can add to it. I was the same way. I was like, I want to see my food. I want to go down the aisles, and now I'm like, damn, this is so tight.
So tell us a little bit about your books. I know you have two that have been published and are for sale, and one that is upcoming.
Yeah, yeah. So my first book is called Vegetarian Heartland, and that one it took me a couple of years because it's all seasonal. And if anyone who's local is interested in getting any of my books, they might really like this one because this has a lot of photos around town. So there's photos of the lake, and there's photos at the farmers market and things like that. So that one's seasonal, all vegetarian. And then my second book is called Platters and Boards, and that's a more like appetizer-y book for people who like cheese plates and just like more like small plate food. And then my third book is kind of a sequel to that second book because the second book did really, really well. And I pitched a bunch of ideas to my publisher, and they basically were just like, we just want more of this book. So this is similar to Platters and Boards in that it's a lot of like small plates. But it also has an element of more like styling. So I talk more about how to set your table and how to, pick out colors for your table and props and things like that. So yeah, and that'll be coming out in spring 2021.
Great. Yes. Hopefully by then we will be able to gather and have parties and enjoy company and good food together.
Fingers crossed.
Right. So my last question is we're doing this local series. We really want it to be about local artists and for local community. Tell us a little bit about how you got to Bloomington and maybe just what you love about Bloomington.
Yeah, definitely. So I moved to Bloomington to go to college. I've been here for maybe about 12 years now. And so like so many people, I ended up here because of college, and then I just loved it. I fell in love with it. I like that it's close enough to my family. Like I didn't move to the coast or anything. It's close enough to my family that I can drive to them, but it also has so many amazing amenities that other places in the Midwest don't have. We have such great food and music, and obviously there's just a really great community here when it comes to, the arts and food, and yeah, I love it here.
How can the community support you as an artist? Where can they find your work? Where can they pick up your book whenever it becomes available? Yeah, how can they support Shelly?
Yeah. So if you just want to follow along with my photography and recipes, which I put out free recipes every week, you can follow me on Instagram at Vegetarian Ventures. And then if you want to pick up one of my books, locally, they're available at the corner bookstore. They're available at Gather, and Good for Cooks has them. And then if you are not shopping in person right now because of obviously everything going on with the pandemic, they are available online on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, at Anthropology, and at crateandbarrel.com.
Cool. Well, thanks, Shelly. It's great having you. And we'll be back next month with another local artist. So stay tuned. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks
And
so much for having me.
yeah, we'll see you soon.